My name is Madison Blake. I'm 34 years old. I used to be the deputy chief financial officer of a corporation in Chicago and the wife of its CEO, Nathan Blake. I once believed that being with him was the peak of success. Until one night, in our own home, during a dinner party for French business partners, I overheard my husband laughing and calling me stupid and decorative. He said it in French, to his mistress, Aubrey Sinclair, a young and ambitious assistant. He didn't know I understood every word. I kept smiling, poured wine, and hosted our guests like a proper lady. But that night, I quietly found my passport, submitted a visa application to New York, and decided to walk away from the life I had sacrificed everything to build. Have you ever been humiliated in your own home? If you felt that kind of pain, leave a comment below, like this video, and subscribe to follow the rest of my story, the story of a radical turning point. I once had a full MBA scholarship to Stanford. I had packed my suitcase, prepared all the documents, and drawn up a future fueled by my own ambition and passion. But then Nathan, he called me from a cramped room in West Loop, his voice shaking with excitement. Madison, I have an idea, a startup. I just need you by my side. I gave it all up. The ticket to a brilliant career, the dreams I had nurtured since high school, just to stand behind him, laying the foundation for a success that hadn't even existed yet. In the beginning, we were truly a team. I wrote the business plans, built the balance sheets, negotiated the lease for our first office. When money ran out, I sold my old car to pay our first employee. By day, I pitched with him. By night, I drafted financial reports under the kitchen light while our one-bedroom apartment lay silent. Nathan once held my hand during a thunderstorm as we stood beneath our company's first sign, a flimsy wooden board nailed to the wall, and said, "Without you, none of this would exist." But promises don't live as long as power. As the company started to grow, as those seven-figure contracts began to pour in, Nathan changed. Gradually, I was no longer invited to strategic meetings, he said. "You should stay home and rest, this work's getting tough." I thought he was being caring, but then I realized I wasn't resting, I was still working, but on the invisible tasks no one acknowledged. Handling HR issues, resolving internal crises, cleaning up the messes from impulsive decisions I hadn't been part of. When I asked about a major contract that had recently been signed, Nathan chuckled, half joking. "You still think you're a co-founder, Madison? Things are different now." I swallowed the sting, not because of his words but because of the hollow space growing inside me. Still, I clung on, trying to salvage something that was mine. A sliver of respect, a piece of a role, a flicker of good memory. But the night I heard what he said, everything collapsed. We were having dinner at a high-extend French restaurant, a private dinner Nathan told me not to attend because it wouldn't be appropriate for the staff to know we're married. I didn't care. I went, because something in my gut told me to. I sat at the far end, separated by glass walls and soft music. I saw Nathan and Aubrey just a few steps away. "She doesn't align with the direction anymore," Nathan said in French. His tone casual, like he was describing an outdated product. "Like old software," he laughed. "It was once useful, but now it just slows the system down." Aubrey covered her mouth to laugh, eyes gleaming with triumph. "So if I hadn't gone abroad that year, do you think you would have chosen me instead of her?" Nathan didn't hesitate. "Absolutely." I sat in silence. Each word pierced through me, not because he was wrong, but because he was so brutally honest. A truth with no mercy. This was the man I had once protected from bullies at the orphanage. The man who once promised, "I won't let anyone hurt you." Now he was the one who hurt me most. I got up quietly and walked out of the restaurant before they could see me. That night, I didn't go home right away. I walked along Lake Michigan, watching the distant lights ripple across the water. With each step, I pulled back another sacrifice I had given to the wrong person. And when I got home, I opened my laptop and found the old email from the New York investment firm I had once turned down. I typed a simple message. "I'm open to talking again if the position is still available." Within 6 hours, I received a reply. Marina Alvarez, the former strategy director in New York, now the CEO of Astoria Capital, a venture capital firm, wrote back with warmth and clarity. We've always believed in your value, Madison. If you're ready, let's schedule a Zoom meeting as soon as possible. The steam was long gone, but I kept holding the cup like it could warm me. That familiar sense from the early days of building something returned. I didn't have time to hesitate anymore. 3 days later, I was in a sleek office tucked away on the 18th floor of a historic building in River North, not to ask for a job, but to begin a clean, strategic exit. No loose ends. No pieces of me left behind. The person I met was Harper Delaney, a top-tier divorce attorney in Chicago. She looked to be around 40, calm and composed, with a voice that was both gentle and firm. I knew I needed someone like her, not just to defend me, but to teach me how to defend myself, within the law and without noise. Madison, Harper said after scanning the documents I brought. Spare me the details. What's your goal? I looked her straight in the eyes. I want to make sure he doesn't get the chance to destroy anything I've built. Not now. Not ever. Then we'll need 3 things: financial evidence, proof of professional misconduct, and a legal path to secure your separate assets. The less emotion, the better. I left her office with a long checklist and one final instruction. Act like nothing's changed. The calmer you are, the more off guard he'll be. I started digging through everything. Bank transfer records, emails between Nathan and Aubrey filled with suspiciously unprofessional language. There was a media consulting payment for $38,000, transferred from the company account to Aubrey's personal name. No contract, no board minutes to justify it. In the email, Nathan wrote, "Think of it as a reward for making those boring meetings a little more bearable." I printed it all, organized it by date, highlighted every key item, and sent it straight to a private file at Harper's office. One night, I sat alone in my home office, the same place I had spent hundreds of hours building business plans for Nathan, and replayed the recording from that French dinner. His voice rang out clearly, the clink of wine glasses, and then Aubrey's laugh. She's not compatible anymore, like outdated software. I don't know how many times I listened to that recording, not to feel the pain again, but to remember. His words were the final boundary between me and the past. The following week, Harper helped me set up an anonymous trust, transferring all my personal shares in the company into a separate legal entity represented by counsel. From the outside, no one could trace the connection between me and the trust, not even Nathan. All future dividends, investment profits, and assets generated were now fully protected. I sat across from Harper as I signed the final documents, the expensive pen resting in my hand like a legal weapon. From now on, anything held under this entity can't be divided in any divorce settlement as long as we follow protocol, Harper said. I stayed calm. I don't want to take anything from him, I just want to protect what I built. She looked at me, her eyes reflecting genuine respect. Madison, very few people walk into this office and say that with such clarity. This is going to make him lose control. When I left Harper's office that day, I knew I was getting closer to the end. Not the end of a marriage, but the end of living like a shadow in the very story I helped write. On Monday morning, I arrived at the office as usual. Same familiar elevator, 27th floor, gray-carpeted hallway, the faint smell of coffee from the pantry. But when I swiped my badge at the main entrance, a sharp tone sounded. Access denied. Tried again. Nothing. The door remained locked. The front desk assistant, a girl named Haley, rushed over, looking uncomfortable. "Miss Madison, I'm so sorry. I didn't know about this. IT got orders this morning to reset all your access codes." I stood there for a few seconds. "It's okay," I said, "just open the door. I need to grab a few things." As I walked in, I felt like a stranger in a place I had helped build from the first brick. My desk was empty, no laptop, no documents, no trace that I had once sat there every day for nearly a decade. Near the desk, in the trash bin, was a wedding photo frame. Me in a lace gown, Nathan beside me, both smiling under the golden light of our small ceremony by Lake Geneva, one hand holding the bouquet, the other gripping his. We once believed in forever. The photo had been removed from the frame, tilted inside crumpled paper. "Oh, Madison," came a familiar voice behind me. "Aubrey Sinclair. She wore a fitted white blouse, pencil skirt, hair swept into a confident bun. "I thought you might want this," she said, picking up the photo frame and handing it to me with a look halfway between pity and triumph. After all, it was a beautiful memory. I silently took the photo out, tore it in half, then again, and again, until only scraps remained on the desk. "No need to clean up after me," I said calmly, placing the empty frame back in front of her. She stood still for a second, lips pressed together, then forced a polite smile. "You should really take some time off. Nathan's concerned about your health. The workload here is intense now." I held her stare, not a flicker of emotion in mine. "Workload has never been my problem, disrespect is." Without waiting for a response, I turned toward the boardroom, where Nathan was holding the Monday morning meeting with the directors. I pushed the door open. The room fell silent. Nathan looked up, momentarily stunned. "Madison? What are you doing here?" I walked over and placed an envelope in front of him. "This is my resignation letter, fully signed." A director to his right raised an eyebrow. "Madison, what's going on? I just heard you were supposed to lead the Boston project." Nathan quickly jumped in, voice tinged with discomfort. "Madison and I already discussed this. She needs rest. We've been thinking about a new direction." "A new direction meaning replacing your wife with your mistress?" A wave of silence swept across the room. Nathan grew impatient. "Madison, don't turn a personal matter into a company issue." I stared straight at him. "You blurred that line first. I'm just closing something you thought you could control forever." As I stepped out into the hallway, I saw Aubrey's face through the glass in the room next door. Clutching her phone, pale, eyes darting. Maybe she hadn't expected me to speak up. Maybe she thought I'd just vanish quietly like a fading shadow. Back at my desk, a few former colleagues approached. One of them, Elena, someone from legal I'd helped keep during a round of layoffs, looked at me with concern. "Yes, Madison, we heard. The new admin asked me to clear your desk this morning. I didn't know." I placed a hand on her shoulder and smiled. "It's okay. Some things are far more worth holding on to." I opened the bottom drawer and took out a folder. Inside were the original contracts for the investments I had personally secured, under my name, and on top, a copy of the document I knew Harper would need in the next few days. The glass door clicked gently shut behind me. And I knew. Not every ending is loud. Some endings happen quietly, but they can't be undone. Like the way someone gets pushed out of the very empire they helped build, only for everyone to realize she had reclaimed her part long ago. The road leading to the old brown brick house on the outskirts of Evanston looked the same as the last time I turned down it, lined with maple trees, so quiet I could hear my footsteps echo off the stone pavement. I stopped the car, turned off the engine, and sat in the driver's seat for a long while. Greenhaven Orphanage, where I'd spent nearly the first 15 years of my life, wasn't fancy, but it was the only place I had ever felt safe. There was a woman there who had never given birth but taught me how to be a good human being. Her name was Margaret Whitlow. I still called her Mom Margaret, even though we weren't related by blood. The front door cracked open before I could even ring the bell. Margaret was already standing there, as if she had known I'd be coming. "You've lost a lot of weight," she said softly, without judgment. I laughed. "No one ever says you've gained weight during times like these, Mom." She opened the door wider, stepping aside to let me in. The scent of butter cookies and old wood filled the air. Nothing had changed, and that steadiness made my heart settle. I sat down on the old floral couch where Nathan and I once fought over the TV remote as teenagers. "I turned in my resignation," I said, pouring myself a cup of tea from the porcelain pot she had already prepared, "and I'm getting ready to leave Chicago, for good." Margaret sat across from me, unsurprised. She had always understood everything before I even said it. "You used to think you'd spend your life with him, didn't you?" I don't know why, but the dumbest part of me kept believing Nathan was still that boy. The one who used to get bullied for his stutter, for his torn clothes. The one I used to stand in front of and yell at the bigger kids, "If you want him, you'll have to go through me." Margaret smiled gently, a sad and forgiving kind of smile. "Sometimes people forget who they are once they feel strong enough, to no longer need protecting. I clenched my hands. The thing is, I didn't protect him because I thought he was weak. I protected him because I saw a good heart in him. But maybe I was wrong. Or maybe that heart's gone. Margaret didn't respond right away. She stepped into the back room, where childhood evenings smelled of ink, wood, and unspoken dreams. When she returned, she held an old wooden box, covered in a thin layer of dust. This is something you left here when you were 14. You said it was to remind yourself never to forget where you came from. I opened it. Inside was a small piece of paper, handwritten in shaky, childish letters. I don't need anyone's pity. I'll be great, and I'll never beg for love. I froze, eyes burning. I remembered now. I had written that note the night Nathan cried after a family rejected him for adoption. And I stayed silent, not telling him I had been rejected that same day. I pretended to be okay, so he wouldn't feel alone. You kept that promise, Margaret said, placing a hand on my shoulder. But sometimes being strong also means knowing when it's time to leave. Not to win, but to keep from losing yourself. I turned my face away, tears falling faster than I could wipe them. I'm going to New York, I whispered. They're waiting for me there, a job, an opportunity, with no ties to this past. Margaret didn't ask anything else. She pulled me into her arms the way she always did. When I failed a test, or when a childhood dream shattered in the loneliness of abandonment. You know, she whispered, sometimes the best thing we can do for someone we once loved is to walk away so they have a chance to realize what they lost. No words came. I leaned into her warmth, breathing in the comfort I hadn't felt in years. On the way back, I passed the backyard, the old playground with its wooden swings still standing. A group of children were playing tag. A brown-haired little girl looked back at me and smiled. In that moment, I saw my younger self, lonely, but never without hope. I turned away, my heart both heavy and light. I knew I was ready, not just to leave, but to disappear. In a way no one could ever trace. October in New York. The wind was sharp, but the sky was strangely blue. I had just finished a meeting with Marina and the strategy team. I stepped into my usual cafe next to the building, the same place I once sat for hours in those early days, unsure of everything, watching the city move and reminding myself that I was still alive, still whole. The phone in my pocket buzzed gently. A message from an unknown number. Just one line. I'm waiting for you in the lobby. I knew exactly who it was. I walked down as calmly as if I'd just left a yoga class, and just as I expected, Nathan was standing there. His once perfectly styled hair was a mess, his shirt wrinkled, and his eyes, no longer those of a man who thought he'd won. When he saw me, a mix of relief and panic spread across his face. I stopped a few steps away. Nathan swallowed hard, unsure if he still had the right to speak. I've been looking for you for a month. No one knew where you went. You vanished like you never existed. I tilted my head slightly, my gaze steady. That's what people who've been dismissed tend to do. They disappear quietly, then leave behind a void no one knows how to fill. He took a step back. I knew Nathan wasn't used to this version of me. A woman who didn't cry, didn't ask for explanations, didn't try to salvage what was already gone. Madison, please, hear me out. Everything's falling apart. We lost the 2 biggest contracts this quarter. The Japanese partner is demanding a full audit. The press is picking it up. They're mentioning me and you. Do you know what they're asking? They're asking why. I exhaled gently. And you're here hoping I'll answer for you? No. No. He shook his head quickly. I'm here to ask you to come back. We could... I interrupted with the faintest furrow of my brow. We? Nathan fell silent. A group of young employees passed by, recognized me, nodded politely and walked off. Nathan followed them with his eyes, then turned back to me, suddenly realizing he was standing outside a building where I, not he, held influence. Madison, he said more softly. Aubrey? She left. Couldn't handle the pressure. I need you? You know the company. You know how to turn things around. You're better at this than anyone, and if you come back, you'll have another trophy to add to your collection, I said, my voice cool and even. Nathan shook his head. No, it's not like that. I stepped closer. Only one step now stood between us. He looked at me, confused. I met his eyes and said slowly, "You didn't lose me today, Nathan. You lost me the moment you looked at me in a room full of strangers and chose to humiliate me in a language you thought I'd forgotten." He opened his mouth but couldn't say a word. I went on. "You thought I'd stand by you forever, nodding, sacrificing, like I was an extension of your suit or your financial report. But I'm not an accessory. And I'm clear-headed enough now to cut out anyone who no longer sees me as human." Nathan slowly sank to his knees, right at the glass doors, while dozens of eyes began to notice. "Madison, I'm sorry, I really am. You didn't deserve that. Please." A man who once believed the world revolved around him, now grasping for something he no longer had a right to hold. I walked into the building. The glass doors slid shut behind me. I didn't look back, because I knew the only thing he was kneeling for was the reputation he shattered the moment he disrespected the one person who had truly stayed. No need for champagne or staged smiles. Closure came softly, without hashtags or headlines. After the final court hearing, I left Chicago in silence, as if I had simply closed an old door with nothing left behind. I chose Brooklyn, a worn-down apartment near Prospect Park. The ceilings were a little low, the window opened onto the branch of an old oak tree, but the morning light filtered gently through thin curtains. I didn't rent it for the price or the amenities, but for the quiet peace I felt when I walked in. It was a place that asked nothing of me. The settlement wasn't enough to change my life entirely, but it was enough to finally do what I'd been dreaming of for years: start a nonprofit called Hollow Light. A faint light for women who had been hurt by power and distorted love. The office of Hollow Light sat inside a renovated building in Clinton Hill. No flashy signs, no marble reception, just a warm room with desks, bookshelves, a printer, and a little tea corner. With me were two founding partners, Carly, a former legal analyst abused by her superior, and Hannah, a freelance artist who survived a controlling marriage. Each of us had a role. Each day we took one step forward. It wasn't easy. Some days we didn't have enough budget to print materials. Some weeks no one came. But slowly, letters began to arrive. Emails, calls from women everywhere, most with names no one would recognize, each carrying a story that had never been told. One afternoon, while I was brewing tea for our first group session, Carly walked in holding a stack of envelopes. "6 more," she said. "1 from North Dakota, 2 from Florida, and a teacher in Seattle. She said she was about to resign, but after reading the article about your hearing, she decided to stay and report the principal's misconduct." I lowered myself into the chair, both hands cupped around the tea, trying to steady what stirred inside. I didn't accept interviews, though requests came weekly. Reporters wanted to hear me talk about how one woman reclaimed power from the man who broke her. I declined TV appearances, I declined branding campaigns. Marina once asked me, half teasing, "Don't you want to use this moment to build influence? You could create an entire empire for women." I smiled. "I don't want to build an empire. I just want to rebuild my heart, from pieces that never got the chance to heal." Sometimes, I still walk alone in the early mornings, along stone-paved paths leading into the park. Runners pass by, old men read their papers, children head to school. No one recognizes me. No one needs to know I was once married to a high-profile CEO, once stood in a courtroom broadcasted across the media. I like it that way. Once, in a private support session, a young woman named Linda sat across from me, eyes red, fingers clutching a photo of her son. "You know," she said quietly, "my husband used to call me an educated burden. And I believed him. For almost 8 years. So, I asked, do you still believe it today?" Linda smiled, her voice trembling. "I'm not sure yet, but when I read what you said in court, silence over time isn't compassion, it's complicity. I felt like I had just been woken up. I don't need anyone's validation to know I have worth. On a late autumn morning, when the trees around Prospect Park began to turn amber and deep brown, I received an unexpected call from Marina. "Madison," she said, her voice as energetic as ever, "do you have time to swing by the Astoria office? There's something I want to discuss with you, not over email. It has to be in person." I arrived at Astoria Capital's headquarters on Hudson Street in early afternoon. The glass-walled room on the 18th floor where I once sat for an interview to restart my life was now the place where a new future began to form. Marina handed me a financial plan, a model chart, and a slim investment file. "I want to start a special fund," she said. "Not a charity, but something to support capable women who lack opportunity because they've been trapped in toxic relationships or power structures. I want you to co-found it with me." Marina wasn't someone who got emotional easily, but this time she placed her hand on mine, her eyes steady. "You have something most accomplished women don't. Empathy without fragility. You know how to walk through fire without burning yourself down." 3 months later, the research fund officially launched. A small gathering in a co-working space in Soho, we invited 20 women to take part in our first program: skill building, financial mentorship, and startup guidance. I stood in the back watching them talk, like they had just shed a rough shell society had forced onto them for too long. The media began to take notice, but this time, I didn't shy away. I gave interviews, but I didn't retell old wounds. I spoke about the work, about the women rising from silence, and the futures they deserve to claim. One reporter described me in an article like this: "Madison Blake doesn't demand attention. She walks into a room with a calmness that makes others naturally quiet." I smiled when I read that. Maybe, after everything, I had finally learned how to stand tall, without needing anyone else to lower their gaze. I met Elijah at a winter fundraiser hosted by a local community group in Brooklyn. He was in charge of designing the event space, a temporary wooden house built in a courtyard, with soft yellow lighting, dried flowers hanging from the ceiling, and long tables made from reclaimed wood. He introduced himself simply: "Elijah Walker. I used to be an architect, now I freelance so I can take care of my mom." His voice was low, even, unhurried. There was something peaceful in his eyes, as if he could see right into people, but never judged what he saw. We didn't speak much that day, but after the event, he texted me: "If you ever want someone to redesign your office for better breathing space, I can help." I said yes. Elijah came by every Saturday. We talked about how lighting affects the mind in enclosed spaces, about Japanese architecture and homes that know how to breathe, and about his mother, a woman living with late-stage cancer, who still grew tomato plants on her balcony every spring. Once, he asked me, "What kind of space did you used to live in?" My voice came slower than my thoughts. Then I said softly, "I always felt cramped, even in a big house, because people kept piling things onto me, expectations, responsibilities, and silence." Elijah didn't say a word. He simply adjusted the placement of a green plant in the corner. His gesture felt like he was helping the room breathe better. We didn't date in the traditional sense. It was late afternoons on a wooden bench in Fort Greene Park, splitting a toasted sandwich, talking about things no one teaches in school, like how to be with someone without making each other smaller. I don't know how long this will last, but I know this: I stopped searching their eyes for signs I wasn't enough. Because Elijah isn't chasing an ideal version. He sees me as I am, healing and whole. And that, already, is enough. I never thought I'd throw another birthday party. In past years, birthdays were nothing more than a reminder that I had aged another year inside a life that barely felt like mine. Nathan used to give me expensive gifts, handbags, jewelry, or dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants. But I always felt like a guest at a celebration that wasn't truly mine. This year was different. I turned 35 on a Sunday afternoon in late spring, in the small backyard of the building where Hollow Light rented a ground floor unit. No floral archways, no fancy invitations. Just a long table draped in white cloth, a few paper lanterns floating above, and the laughter of children playing tag in the grass. Carly and Hannah brought homemade cake, Marina arrived a little late, holding a bouquet of lavender and a small box wrapped in craft paper. Inside was a fountain pen engraved with the words, "Write your own story." I held her gaze and gave her hand a quiet squeeze. She had always known what I needed, even without asking. Elijah arrived last, carrying 2 young potted plants, an olive tree and a mint bush. For the office entrance," he said, "and the other, you can place wherever you like." There was no formal toast, but as everyone was eating cake and chatting, Marina stood up with a glass of apple juice in hand. "If I may say a few words," she smiled, glancing around. "Today is Madison's 35th birthday, a woman we don't just call a colleague but a quiet guide for many women, including myself." Light applause filled the air. I lowered my head slightly, cheeks warm. Marina continued, her voice steady. "Someone once told me that women prove their worth by staying, enduring, and forgiving. But Madison showed us another choice. Leaving, not out of weakness, but from strength, knowing she wasn't born to be tested endlessly for her patience." I can't recall who clapped first, but soon the entire yard filled with gentle, heartfelt applause. I looked around at the faces. Women who had once cried in counseling rooms, trembled while signing divorce papers, children who were terrified their first day here, and now they were all smiling. 8-year-old Emma, the daughter of a single mother we had once helped, tugged at my sleeve and whispered, "Can you blow out the candles now? I want to know what you'll wish for." I looked at the little cake on the table. 4 golden candles flickered in the late afternoon light. Everyone fell silent, waiting. I closed my eyes. For a moment everything returned: the small orphanage room, the cold glass wall of the courtroom, the cooling tea in my Brooklyn apartment, Margaret's eyes, Elijah's warm hands. Then I exhaled softly and blew out the candles. When I opened my eyes, the clapping returned. I smiled at Emma. "I didn't make a wish," I said, "because I don't need anything more to feel complete." I turned to Marina and whispered, "Thank you for believing in me, even when I couldn't believe in myself." She smiled back. "You never needed anyone to believe first, you just needed a quiet enough place to remember who you are." The party wrapped up as the sun began to set. Elijah gathered the planters. Carly packed leftover cake for the kids. I stood alone in the yard, the breeze brushing past my shoulders. I didn't feel like I had reached a destination, nor did I feel like I was starting over. I simply felt alive, in that moment, with a peace that didn't need to prove itself. What do you think of my journey? If you've ever had to walk away to find yourself again, whether from a relationship, a family, or a job that once felt impossible to leave, share it in the comments below. I believe we each have a moment of awakening. No screaming, no revenge, just the calm to walk away, and the courage to never look back. If this story touched something in you, don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family, trust, and the journey home to yourself. Because sometimes the most precious thing isn't where we end up, but how we choose to keep going.